So it's been a really long time since I did a deck collection video. I think I did my very first tarot deck collection video back in September 2018 when I'd only just started my channel, and I only owned about 15 tarot decks. Since then I have got rid of some of those decks, but I've also massively increased the number, so I'm now on about 35, and I thought it was a good time to do another tarot deck collection type video. But I don't like my videos to be overly long because I know that can be really boring to sit through. So what I'm going to do is divide this up into 3 videos of one of 11 decks and then 2 other videos with 12 decks each, and post them individually on my channel so you can check them out as and when you feel like it. With all of that waffle out of the way, I'm going to jump right in and show you my first deck that I have. These are in no particular order. They're like not in the order that I own them or bought them or used them. Some of them I still haven't used yet, although I think everyone in this video I've used. A lot of them still have their boxes, some of them don't. It's all a real mishmash. But the first deck that I want to show you that is part of my collection is the Tarot of the Magical Forest, which was a gift. These have been trimmed and I've edged them in green. These are the backs. I really like this deck. This is one deck that I have worked with. It's traditional RWS, but it's all animals. So the wands are all frogs. The cups are all rabbits. That's a major. Hopefully we'll see some of the other ones. Then we have the swords, which are all cats. And the pentacles are my favourite because they're all foxes. And if you know anything about me or my tastes, you'll know that I have a bit of a soft spot for foxes. This is a really great deck to work with. I really love it. I love the colouring. I love that it's RWS inspired and that it's really easy to work out which card is which. It's cute, which is something that I'm a big fan of. So yeah, this is a great deck for me, and one that I will foresee myself using for a long time in the future. Next up, we have the Llewellyn Classic Tarot. This comes in a couple of different sets, I think. So it also comes in a set that I think is called like Easy Tarot or something like that. But I got this as a Llewellyn Classic Tarot. It's basically a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, but the colouring and the imagery are, I would say, slightly softer than your traditional RWS. Now, I personally got this deck because I wanted something originally that was reasonably on the nose in terms of RWS. I wanted a deck that was RWS cloned, not RWS inspired. But I have said it before, I'm not the hugest fan of Pixie's art style. It's just, I'm not keen on the original RWS. So this deck was like a perfect compromise for me at the time that I got it. It is in order, so you are just going to get to see a few of the majors. But this is a deck that I have like a little makeup bag that my parents got me for Christmas, and you've probably noticed if you've watched my channel, I'm not really a makeup person. It's not something that I wear a lot of, so I don't really carry makeup around with me. So I instead have this in that bag and I carry that around with me. And talking of decks that I carry around with me, another deck that I carry around with me because it's in a tin and it's my only in a tin deck is the Sun and Moon Tarot. This was a gift again. This one was from Patsy. And this is a pretty Thoth inspired deck, I believe. It does have keywords, which is not my favourite thing in the world, but it's just so cute that and the keywords are pretty unobtrusive. The pictures are still very RWS in my opinion. It's a deck that I haven't read with a whole amount. I have just kind of played about with when I'm out and about, but it's one that I definitely like a lot. I really appreciate the artwork, And I actually don't mind the keywords on this deck because they are so subtle. Let me just see if I can do something about this lighting because it's a bit shit. Maybe that's better, I don't know. So I do like this one. I like that it also includes the little symbols for earth, air, fire and water on the different suits as well. And it's also got Hebrew letters, I believe these are. I don't know if you can really see them, but in the corners of the mages, it's got Hebrew letters as well. So it's got a little bit extra on there that I don't have in most of my other decks, but it's cute and it's small and I can carry it around with me. Next up is the deck that I'm currently working with at the moment this month, and that is Tarot del Fuego by Ricardo Cavallo. This deck scared the crap out of me when I got it. I'd seen it on Instagram and I loved how bright and vibrant it was, but I'd never really looked at it properly. I'd never really looked at the imagery, and I just assumed that it was an RWS and that it would be, you know, it would be fine. And I got it and I was like, wow, this is a lot darker in imagery than I am used to or comfortable with, and B, it is a pip deck, basically. So although the pips are illustrated, they're not illustrated in any way that has anything to do with the meaning of the actual card. So it is, for all intents and purposes, a pip deck. But I've been working with it now for 9 days and I freaking love it. It reads amazingly. It's a really fun deck to work with. I'm having no problems connecting with it whatsoever. It's just, yeah, I mean, it's more Marseille than RWS, I would guess, because it's a pip deck, but I think there's more that goes into a Marseille deck being a Marseille deck than that. I don't know enough about it, really. But overall, it's just a really fun deck to work with. I'm really, really enjoying it. Another deck that I have that's very, very similar is the Fairies Tarot. This is a low Scarabeo deck, which I have trimmed and edged and had this one for absolutely years. Never did anything with it because, again, it is a pip deck. So it has... this one is very much a pip deck. It has these illustrations, but the illustrations are for pretty purposes and have absolutely nothing to do with the meaning of the card. And then it just has the layout of the numbers. Now, I believe... I never remember. I believe that bells are pentacles, possibly. Leaves are definitely swords. Leaves are definitely swords. Acorns are wands, I think. Hearts are obviously cups. And then what is the other thing that you have then? Nothing. Is bells, leaves, acorns, hearts. No, that's it. I don't know what I'm looking for. But every so often I have to go and check it out online and just remind myself, because I do, particularly the bells and the acorns, I do tend to get them mixed up. But it's such a wonderful deck. This is another one that I was really intimidated by because of the pips. And I really didn't think I was going to be able to use. But I love it. And I love how like different the minors and the majors are in style. Like these are really vibrant and cute and kind of cartoonish, and then these are very old style, like Victorian era type drawings on the pips. So they're the minors, so they're just very, very, it's like two different styles that has come together beautifully to make a deck that's a lot of fun to work with. Next up, we have another deck that I've only worked with very, very recently, although I've had it for a long time, and that is the Greenwich Tarot, another Llewellyn. I have a lot of Llewellyn decks. I think most of us do, don't we? And this one is, again, it's pretty RWS inspired. It does make some changes, and some of the cards, to me, like this one is a great example, doesn't necessarily fit my understanding of the card. But overall, it was a good deck to work with. It had some interesting changes, like Harvest was an interesting change. The Crone instead of Strength, another interesting change. It was a deck that I really, really enjoyed working with, but is definitely not top of my list of decks. It's one that I will continue to work with and I will keep in my collection, but it's not at the top of my collection. Something that gets asked a lot actually is about this deck and another deck, which is also part of my collection, which I will show you next. And people often ask if they're going to get a witch deck, should they get the Greenwich deck or should they get the Everyday Witch? Now, the Everyday Witch is kind of like my workhorse, and it was for a long time. It was the deck that really encouraged me to take tarot seriously, to really learn more about the tarot. It's very fun and twee and has that kind of old postcardy type feel. It reminds me in some cases of the Worst Witch, which I really love, especially like the full card has that kind of Worst Witch vibe for me. It's falling apart, this one. It's so old and battered that and has been used so much that it's falling apart. And it's one of the ones that I may very well even get a second copy, because this one will not last forever. But given the choice between the Green Witch and the Everyday Witch, if I was only going to have one, it would be this one. It would definitely be this one of the two. This one is just much more fun to work with. And it's one of those ones, interestingly, if you watch a lot of people, if you watch like Julie at Peekaboo Rose talks about this deck and how she really didn't think it would be for her. And Jen over at Jen's Balanced Tarot also talks about this deck and how she really didn't think it would be for her. And yet both of them really enjoy working with this deck. And that seems to be quite a common theme. People who think that they're not going to enjoy this deck end up really loving working with it. So it's definitely worth a go if it's one that you're thinking about but you haven't actually hit the purchase button on yet. Another deck that I've had in my collection for a really long time, although this is a replacement copy that Jen from Jen's Balanced Tarot very kindly got for me, is the Robin Wood Tarot. This is another one where I really love this deck. I think personally this is a deck that I would recommend to a beginner because I think it's RWS inspired, but the artwork is very soft. It's very evocative. I think every single card tells a story and reads beautifully, and while still remaining very, very traditional in most cases. And I think it's very clear from a lot of these cards some of the meanings that they're trying to evoke. So I would definitely, this for me would be a deck that I would absolutely recommend to a beginner, and it is one of my favourite decks of all time. And this is also one of my favourite devil cards of all time, for those who didn't know that and were interested. Nearly at the finish line now, only 3 more decks to go, and the next deck that I want to talk about is the Joie De Vivre Tarot. Oh, that was really bright. This was a gift from a friend who sadly is no longer with us. She did die of cancer in 2018. And she was my tarot buddy, or one of my tarot buddies, and she bought me this deck as a birthday present. So there's a lot of sentimental value and nostalgia and all kinds of, emotions tied into this deck, which is why it's one that I will keep forever and I will never ever part with. And I also don't think I'll ever do anything with, like, modify or anything like that. But it's a deck that I would want to keep anyway. I adore Paulina Cassidy's artwork. I love this deck. I love the kind of fantasy almost element to this deck. I love all the little creatures, and I love that in the book they've all got names as well and little stories to go with them in the little white book. It's a lot of fun to work with. Some of the cards I don't read in the same way that I read a lot of I read that card in a lot of other decks, is what I'm trying to say. So it's just a deck that I really, really enjoy. I really enjoy having it as part of my collection. and it's one that I will reach for and continue to reach for in the future. I love that the Empress has skulls on her dress. For some reason that just really amuses me. The next deck in my collection was again a gift, and it is the Chrysalis Tarot, which was a gift from Lisa at Supportive Tarot. This deck is one of those decks that you could read it as an RWS deck and you would pretty much be okay, but it does also have its own style and its own feel to it, so it's definitely worth working with on that basis. So you have the scrolls, which are the swords. Let's see what else we have in here. Some of the majors, as you can see, they've changed the names, but then they've put the title, the original title underneath, which makes it really easy to work with. There's a lot of scrolls and not much else. Okay, you have stones, which are pentacles. You have spirals, which are wands. And then you have mirrors for cups. And so the artwork is very, very different than you would see in a Rider-Waite-Smith with a lot of them. Each of the court cards also has a title of some kind. There's some kind of artist or minstrel or performer of some in some way. It's a really great deck. This is another one that I was really scared to work with, and yet once I did start working with it, I found it a real pleasure to connect with and to work with. And oh my god, the Three of Mirrors is there's something about that card that I think there's something about getting a lion and a lamb together on the same card, and it just makes me go all yeah, because there's the Lightseer one as well, the Strength Lightseer card that it just makes me go all fuzzy, warm and fuzzy. I love it. But anyway, so this is a great deck for doing something different with. If you want to read just like straight up RWS meanings, you can do that, but it is an awesome deck for taking you outside of that known comfort zone and really pushing your intuition and your ability to read what's in the card as opposed to using knowledge that you might already have. And the last deck in this video, though certainly not the last deck in my collection, as I say, there will be 2 more videos to come, is the Alice in Tarot in Wonderland deck, I believe it's called actually, the Llewellyn version. This one again is in order, so you're just going to see a load of majors. But this is, anybody who knows me even slightly will tell you that I am the biggest Alice in Wonderland fan, like hardcore, obsessed Alice in Wonderland fan. So there was going to be at least one Alice deck in my collection. I actually have 2. I am on the lookout for more, and I am still debating whether I want the Dame Darcy one or not. But I love this deck. I love this deck. I did a comparison of this one and my Alice one, and I talked about in there about how for me this deck is very much more about RWS imagery and sticking to the RWS sort of theme throughout the deck, whereas the other one is more about taking different scenes from the actual story and trying to make them fit. So in terms of a reading deck, this one reads much, much better in most cases than the Alice one does, in my opinion. But I think they're both worth having. But I love this deck. And every time I get this deck out and every time I look at it, I want to go back and read Alice in Wonderland all over again and Through the Looking Glass all over again, even though I only read them last year. So it's a great, great deck. Absolutely great. Again, not one of my favourites and not the one that I necessarily reach for first, but one that I'm really happy to have in my collection. So that is part 1. That's my first 11 decks that I have for you. I will be back very, very shortly with part 2. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing and helping me out. And I will see you all soon for the next one. Take care, everyone, and lots of love. Bye-bye.